Afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this session as part of Entrepreneurs Week at Freitas. Many thanks for joining my colleague Freitas and I, and our guest speakers, whom I'll introduce shortly. In this session, as you know, we're going to focus on international expansion, but more particularly, we're going to focus on what it takes to expand internationally in an online environment. Now, why have we chosen this subject? I mean, clearly, these strange times, physical expansion is difficult. But going forward, there's a real risk that COVID will bring about some quite severe disruption and changes to the way that people around the world work, the way they travel, where they shop, the way they eat. And so, as we've probably heard quite a bit by now, that a lot of the trends that were already underway in the global economy have been accelerated by the pandemic. And this is probably especially true of online and the digital economy, with the great rise in digital behavior, such as remote working and learning, telemedicine, delivery services, etc. And I think my view is that this is going to continue apace alongside some other structural changes, such as perhaps the regionalization of supply chains, maybe a further explosion of cross-border data flows to reflect the increasing digitalization of everybody. And what this says to me for entrepreneurs in any event is that whilst there will be challenges, there will also be huge opportunities arising from the current situation, and expansion and global expansion, international expansion is going to be a key facet of this. So how do you go about that? Well, I think the very first thing is you try and target your jurisdiction. So where, if you're a UK entrepreneur, where do you want to expand to? Which is the right market for you to look to move your business and expand online? And we've selected, I suppose, the three key markets, the heavyweights in terms of the size of their economies and the number and the wealth of the consumers within those territories. So we have lawyers from Austria, representing not just Austria, but wider Europe. And in this, I'm already excluding the UK from that, China and the US. From a legal perspective, whilst the world has become increasingly international, it nonetheless remains a series of nation states with their own laws and their own customs. So international expansion is not necessarily easy, and taking local advice in the jurisdiction at an early stage, I think, is critical. So we've chosen leading lawyers in each of these jurisdictions. We have, we see us all on the video. We've got Hu Che, law firm Junhei in China. We've got Sarah Warrad and Roland Marco Wolf-Thies in Austria and wider Europe, and David Kaufman and David Brown of Nixon Peabody in the United States. So I'm going to ask each of them, probably starting with Sarah and Roland, just to say a very short introduction to their topic, and then we'll move into a poll before we then move back into the speakers and a wider discussion around expansion in their respective markets. So Sarah, Roland, if I could hand over to you, please.
Many thanks, Anthony. Good afternoon, everyone. So it's a good question, why entrepreneurs should look abroad and why now. I would say that the right timing is a key factor when expanding in online business. When we look back to the phase prior to the COVID crisis, virtual meetings, virtual shareholder meetings were rather the exception in Europe, or even not possible. And now the entire world has shifted towards virtual meetings, and everyone knows now Zoom and Teams, and everyone knows how to use those tools. The other day, Microsoft CEO said, we have seen 2 years worth of digital transformation in only 2 months. So what I want to say is that we all adjusted very quickly to the new online environment. And I do believe that people will continue to use the mentioned digital tools and further other tools. So to sum it up, the timing for international expansion in a digital way favors entrepreneurs, as people are extremely open for new digital tools. So I'll pass to Ho.
Right. Well, thank you very much. I echo that, and I think in the past half year, so we have experienced a lot, and we have also learned a lot. And the economy keeps on changing, and so a lot of the new business models are actually growing out of crisis. So when there is a crisis, there is probably also an opportunity. I would say the timing now is better than ever to look into online global expansion. So I'm very excited to be here to sharing this information together with all of you. Thank you. So I'll pass to David.
Hi, David Kaufman. I'm here in San Francisco. A little early here, but delighted to participate. I would echo what Sarah said about, this is an opportunity to expand, and we are seeing that in terms of companies, again, after a couple months pause, we are incredibly busy looking at, with companies looking at opportunities here in the U.S. And online certainly is giving people the opportunity to do things without necessarily having a big infrastructure here in the U.S., at least sending people back and forth. So it's an exciting topic, and really delighted to be here with my colleague, David Brown, who's in the less exciting place of Chicago, but equally beautiful.
It's pretty exciting, David. We like it. Little rivalry here to start things off. Thanks, David. Just to say a few words, David Brown, a partner with Nixon Peabody here in Chicago and managing partner in our Chicago office. I'm a business lawyer. I work with entrepreneurs from the US and abroad on mergers and acquisitions and capital raises and getting started in the US and general business issues that they run into. So I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you. I think it's to.
So, shall we start with a poll? We thought we might get the audience involved, answering a couple of opening questions. So the first one, and this is a multi-choice, so you can pick more than one. So in your opinion, which of these jurisdictions offers you the biggest opportunity for expansion at the moment? So you can see we've got continental Europe, we've got China and wider Asia, North America, or other. And we'll keep that going for another few seconds, just get the numbers up. Okay, so let's have a look. So we've got 48% China and wider Asia, and continental Europe and North America are neck and neck. So quite diverse, and other is 13%. If anybody wants to let us know in the Q&A what the other might be, then I'd certainly be interested to know. Okay, shall we move on to the next poll? We've got another one coming up. If you could run that, Abby. So this is, you've got one choice here. We're looking for your main concern about international expansion. So is it additional regulation, tax, lack of knowledge about foreign markets, geopolitical issues, of which there are many at the moment, of course, and the COVID, of course, losing control of your data or your brand, or the level of investment required? So if you'd just like to have a few more seconds on that one. Okay, that's, yeah. Okay, I think we're there. Interesting. Geopolitical issues, as I say, quite a few of those. Coming out pretty much on top, nearly half of you, followed by lack of knowledge of foreign markets. Of course, we're here to help you on that one, and then a few others. Okay, fine. Okay, thanks for participating in those polls. So I think, Anthony, we're now going to move on to the discussion stage. Do you want to take that on?
Thanks, Ian. Yes, in fact, I'm going to just swiftly move on to our speakers. So I think if we'll probably kick off with the closest to the UK from an expansion perspective, and that's back to Sarah and Roland from Wolf Tees.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us. When it comes to expansion in the online environment, such may face different challenges, and if I reckon correctly, out of the potential obstacles in the polls, the legal one, additional regulation, was one of the most prominent, and this is also why we choose to speak a little bit about the challenges when it comes to cross-border services and services potentially being subject to different local regulatory frameworks in different countries. As you may know, we operate in quite a couple of different jurisdictions in Central and Eastern European region, so we are quite used to coping with these problems. We do not want to talk about simply one country interpreting harmonization, harmonized laws different than the other ones, but to talk about where European regulations, European provisions may enable cross-border services in the online environment. And this brings us to the so-called e-commerce directive, which provides a legal privilege for information society services providers when they are established within the European Economic Area. And the e-commerce directive provides for the privilege of the so-called country of origin principle. According thereto, the taking up and pursuit of an online service, for example, requirements concerning qualifications or authorization, is determined by the law of the member state in which the service provider is established, so the country of origin. And member states other than the country of origin can only take limited restrictive measures. These measures must then be necessary to protect specific legal interests, public policy, public security, for example, consumer protection also. They must relate to a specific information society service, and they must be proportionate in an overall assessment. And we chose one case which we think is particularly of interest because it relates to very well-known brands, service providers, Airbnb on the one hand and Uber on the other hand, which at the first glance obviously operate similar business models, which are about placement services, so mediating services rendered by other people. And the case starts in 2017 when a French tourist board filed a complaint against Airbnb Ireland. The accusation was that Airbnb was engaged in brokerage and management of buildings or apartments in France. But the allegation was that this was done without the required business license. Yeah? Airbnb objected and argued that as a service provider, service of the information society, it qualifies as being subject to the country of origin principles under the e-commerce directive, and therefore that it did not fall under the relevant criminal provisions. And quite interestingly, in its ruling in late 2019, the European Court of Justice ruled that a placement service such as that provided by Airbnb is to be classified as an information society service. It therefore falls under the e-commerce directive, and no national fine were to be imposed on Airbnb in the subject case. The decision contrasts, however, to the ruling of the European Court of Justice on Uber, where the court did not qualify the intermediation service offered by Uber as information society service, but as an origin transport service, which led to the application of national Spanish regulatory laws, and Uber did not have such approvals, local approvals. So even though both service providers basically operate intermediation platforms, they are treated differently. Why? The different legal assessment of Uber and Airbnb was in particular due to their ability to influence the respective service provided. The ECJ concurred with Airbnb's view and ruled that Airbnb's agency business could be separate from the actual rental business. And this is the crucial aspect in here. The service of Airbnb is in no way indispensable for the parties involved, so the tenants and landlord. And furthermore, Airbnb has no influence on the amount of the rents. This was quite different to the case of Uber, where the court said that it is a transportation service provider. And the main differentiating factor was that Uber has a decisive influence on the conditions of the transport, namely setting the maximum price of a trip, collection and transfer of the fare, sort of quality control over the vehicle, over the driver, and so on. So on the basis of these considerations, Uber service was to be considered as an integral part of the overall service and not regarded as an information society service. So we can see that we have similar types of business models. However, it makes a huge difference if a service in an online environment being rendered as a sort of information society service, therefore availing itself of the country of origin principle and not being subject to local regulations, whereas on the other hand, these privileges did not apply. So this is a quite interesting piece of jurisdiction, which holds true not only for our region where we operate in, but basically for the entire European Union. And the e-commerce directive is now already at a very late stage and due to be updated in the legislation, and we are very much looking forward to seeing where this will head us to in the near future. So this, from our end, a short war story, so to say, on cross-border online services and the challenges you may be facing in this respect.
Great, thank you very much, Roland. That's really interesting. I think now we move on to, I think, who in China?
Sure. Thank you, Anthony. So I'm very happy to say that I think the poll results are very encouraging. I think a lot of people are still looking at global expansions, and China and Asia is chosen to be one of the top selections. And I think China is particularly improving in many different areas. For example, the World Bank has a doing business ranking, and China in 2019 in the most latest ranking has ranked 31st. So has made a lot of improvement over the past few years. And also China has a growing middle class population, and Chinese people has open-minded culture. And if you come to cities in China, you will see many foreign and international brands, and people like trying new food and new solutions. And so people like to have different variety, and so people also like traveling a lot as well. And this year has been very challenging. So if that could be services or solutions that can be provided through online platforms, either through leveraging current China's online sites or developing new ones to target Chinese markets, I think that should be that can be quite successful if the solution are right for the market. We actually have helped as legal counsel some companies to ensure compliance of certain solutions that are launched not within China but targeting Chinese customers. And from our understanding, that solution is doing quite well and apparently quite successful. The second point I would like to make is, I think that has also been shown in people's feedback in the pool, that people are concerned about not understanding the local culture. So that's why I think finding a right partner could be very important. For example, in the past few months, we have also helped, and myself personally have helped companies looking at expanding in China through partners, some online and some physical investment. But even though foreign investors will be able to establish a wholly foreign-owned enterprise, which basically means you don't need to have a partner to establish a business in China. But why are companies still looking for a partner? I think that can help to get a better understanding of the local culture and also getting a leverage in expanding more quickly than doing this on your own. And I think also, depending on what kind of partner we're talking about, whether it's investment into a joint venture or a distribution partner or a licensing partner or manufacturing partner, I guess probably all these different arrangements, some of them are not new, but the online world and particularly this year, people are more concerned about restrictions on travel, geopolitical reasons. And so finding the right partner is probably even more critical than in the past years, where the right partner can really help to steer into a successful path. The third point I would like to make is investors are concerned about compliance issues, are concerned about IP. And I think the feedback we just saw that people are worried about losing control of their brand or losing control of the IP. And we have, when we talk with our customer and our clients, and this has always been like a issue that they will bring out. Of course, we will advise on that as well. So for example, when we advise clients on establishing an entity or establishing a joint venture, one of the key agreements that are always included will be a licensing agreement and covering, for example, like trademark, or if there's patent issue, and so we'll make the proper arrangement. And this is not, of course, not only concerning about the existing trademarks, existing IPs, but also about if you have a partner or if you do business in China, or I guess in any jurisdiction for that matter, and if you develop new IPs, how do you protect your new IP? How do you ensure your trademark, patent, and other trade secrets and information are better protected and synergized with the other business portfolios? And so that's, I guess, becoming more and more important. And when people think about the governance structure, and when they think about these fundamental government documents, and that has always been one of the top issues that people will be concerned about. And another, the fourth one, I guess, but it's related to the third point that I just made, is data protection. So of course, since you are in the UK and in your markets, and data protection is nothing new to you, and Europe is the pioneer in protecting data. But I guess in other parts of the world, people are also paying more and more attention to data. So even if you are not physically doing business in China or in Asia or in other regions, and unavoidably, you will have data, and you will probably have data about Chinese individuals. And those information will be subject to different regulatory regime. And so that should be considered. And not only we, for example, like country like China or many other countries have existing data protection laws, and this is also evolving very quickly as well. And so what kind of data can be, for example, collected? And are you going to use an app? And so what kind of permission are you going to ask from your customer on your app? Are you going to share information, data with your customers, with your partners? And are you going to store those information in China or outside China? And where are those data physically installed? And what about the network security? So all those different considerations are important, and it's a rapidly changing environment. And so the last point I would like to make, which is also about compliance, and I think also people have mentioned that investing in a foreign country, one of the challenge is not knowing the update in the law and about compliance issues, whether it's environmental or taxation, and there could be many different compliance issues. Or if you are investing in through an online platform, you should also be concerned about, for example, like licensing issues for telecommunications. And each country is different, and China is still a developing country, and so some of our laws are still evolving, and we need to think about how these compliance issues are going to evolve as well, or foreign trade and other areas as well. But it's not that complex, and so it's just need to, I guess, finding the right partner to work with, and finding the right source, reliable, and finding counsel and finding service providers that truly know the market, can help you to succeed. So to conclude, and China does promise a very good prospect for international expansion, and similar to, I guess, some of the other fast developing markets as well. So I will strongly encourage you take a look, and so hope that you find a new opportunity in online development and growing your organization and the business. Thank you very much.
Hugh, I've just got a question for you. It's about partnering, and it's partly related to looking after data and the brand as well. So, and actually, it equates a little bit with my experience, not just with China, but with lots of different jurisdictions. Is how do you find a partner that you trust with those vital assets like the brand and the data? I mean, I'm a litigator, so I've had experiences in lots of different jurisdictions where the local partner has perhaps let down the investor or the person who's expanding into that jurisdiction. I'm sure most of the time it works out, but it's just my experience. How do you go about finding that trusted person or trusted organization to partner with? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I guess from a non-legal perspective, I think it's either through a network of people, so that you really know the reputation, but not the forced reputation, but the real reputation of an organization or person that you would like to partner with. Or second approach will be, you already have a local team, and you have a local team that you can trust. I guess through either a good, really reliable network or a trusted local team can help. And from a legal point of view, of course, I guess it's related to making sure you have the right governance structure, shareholder agreements, governance, and also licensing arrangements between the different opportunities, and be prepared, I guess, for the worst case scenario. And if you are prepared, I guess maybe you will not get into that trouble.
And I guess as well, having the right incentives as well to keep them with the new organization that's setting up in their country. So it's a question of having restrictions. So it's a bit of carrot and stick, as we say, is my experience. But okay,
Yeah,
thank you very much. Thanks.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, Ian, David, COVID has really thrown a wrinkle in this as well, in that, most of the times you would go to a foreign country, you'd spend time with people, you develop relationships with them, and then feel comfortable to do a joint venture or work with them. Traveling is much more difficult now, but it doesn't mean you can't do it. I mean, I think the idea is that we're seeing clients that are, adapting and trying to be, connecting, be virtual. And then to whose point about the idea that you have, working with people that you know before, or, have people that can vouch for them is very important. Doing due diligence on them, talking to their former business partners, all of that. But at the end of the day, I tell clients all the time, it's very hard, especially when doing business in lots of different foreign jurisdictions. There's no legal way we can make it so it's ironclad going to be, protected or successful. It really comes down to you working and developing a relationship with your joint venture partners.
Yeah. Thanks, David. Anthony, should we go to the States at this point?
Yes, nice segue to David. David.
Okay, thank you. So a couple of points I'd like to start with. Why should entrepreneurs invest in the US? So a lot of this will be familiar, but I'll tell you what I like to share if I'm given the opportunity to sell this jurisdiction a bit. Obviously, at the outset, I should say that we share many of the same large-scale concerns as the UK and Europe and China and everywhere else. COVID's ending hasn't been written yet. I'm sure we'll look back and say it wasn't done quite right, but we're all working through it pretty well, I think. We do have a lot of heated political rhetoric, of course, both internationally and nationally here. It is a big election year, as everyone knows. Enough said about that. But cutting through all that, the US is still a very attractive market for entrepreneurs, I believe. It's a large market. 2019, we were over $21 trillion in GDP, and the per capita GDP is about $60,000. So it's a very developed market on par with the UK, and attractive business climate, low regulatory burden. In most cases, the process of setting up a venture here, whether that's a joint venture or a greenfield development, starting a new company, you're not too burdensome. It's usually something that can be done in a matter of a few days or a week or two, if you look at the legal steps anyway. Obviously for UK entrepreneurial companies, the language barrier is just about non-existent. I could quote the famous Churchill statement that we're two people separated by a common language. But it is certainly easier, I would think, than going to a market where everything would need translation and rework and local language skills. And of course, that applies to American companies going over to you. It's a very productive workforce. Usually, don't ask me about right now, but usually we have very low unemployment, good availability of educated workers, very strong university system, and it's a flexible workforce. So ease of employment and personnel decisions is there. Typically, hiring and firing decisions can be made based on business needs, and there aren't too many additional considerations, being locked into long-term arrangements with employees. On the personnel side, the worker side, there isn't really much stigma for those who change jobs for the right opportunity, which I think is a nice differentiator from some markets. It's considered a good thing. As much as it annoys me when I review resumes for people we're looking to hire and I see someone having changed jobs every 2 years, okay, it is part of the culture sometimes. It's a relatively young population among countries with similar levels of development, which is very helpful if you're a consumer brand or you're trying to attract entry-level employees. High levels of R&D spending. I've seen different statistics, including about 40% of global R&D spending is here. A very strong protection for intellectual property. About 1/3 of the patents granted worldwide are here. And fairly low trade barriers. Not quite sure where we're going to end up with the EU, China, UK, and others, but we do have very good free trade agreements with a number of jurisdictions and are working on more. And finally, it's just not that expensive to get started here, at least to establish a presence. Just a couple minutes here, I thought I would share a couple of war stories, if you will, of experiences that clients coming into the US have had and sort of things to keep in mind. These will be a little bit specific to their situation, but I promise there's an overall lesson. The first one I call caution radioactive sludge ahead. We were working with a family office, this is several years ago in the UK. It was looking to expand or diversify, you could say, into the US market. They're experts and made their money in testing labs in other countries that are used for pharmaceutical development, cosmetic development, that sort of thing. If you're picturing cute animals getting makeup put on them, they didn't do that, but they did otherwise test. They really knew a lot about the business, and when they came to the US, they were looking at, starting from scratch, acquiring something, and ultimately decided to acquire a laboratory business here that focused on the pharma industry. So our firm was helping with due diligence and negotiation, and we found that this business had historically dumped radioactive, low level, but must be said, radioactive materials into a local sewer system. This led to a very troublesome and worrying situation, and a lot of additional due diligence needed to be done. And our client found that although they had a lot of experts on staff who understood the issue and understood the ways to remediate it, they really were sort of stymied by the multiple layers of government to deal with. People like to think of the US, I know I do, as a low regulatory burden country, but in some cases like this one, you've got city, state, and federal level regulation. And sometimes when one level says something is okay, another one doesn't. So key takeaway there is just, if you're coming into this market, make sure you understand the multiple levels of government. There are some areas where the federal government is all you need to worry about, and others where it's got nothing to do with anything, and then many that are mixed. So very much something to consider before jumping in with both feet. That said, there is a lot of work done to harmonize things among the states and make it work smoothly. But it is a little bit of the same thing that I know the EU and member states have dealt with, is what belongs to the sovereign. In the case of the US, the sovereign is in quotes. Each state has this theory that it's a mini sovereign, and then you have a federal government that likes to make sure that commerce runs smoothly. So just something to think about. And with that, I think I'll turn it to David Kaufman for a war story or two that you may have.
Yeah, thank you. I echo those words from Mr. Brown about how easy it is to do business in the U.S. and how complicated it is to do business in the U.S. all at one time. Yes, I think the one thing I want to point out is employment. So, in America, we have this idea that most people are employees at will, don't have contracts, you don't have any kind of formal relationship with your employer. Yet we are the most litigious country in the world, so that if you leave employment, you likely will have a lawsuit. So many of my international clients that do business here in the U.S. are perplexed by this, and so that's led to some challenges. I think that one typical scenario is we had a consulting company that was flying clients in and out of the U.S., doing fairly well for a number of years, but they got lucky. They were successful. They got this one client to hire them for this huge project, and so they decided, oh, we're going to just open up this office here in the in this big Midwestern city. And hearing how complicated, to some extent, employment is in the U.S., they decided we're just going to make all these people that work for us consultants and other consultants, and we use the term independent contractors. That was a bit of a problem because there are specific rules about that. Some people you can't just say that someone's an independent contractor. There's lots of hoops you have to jump through. So I think that was a bit problematic. Also, they were sending a lot of their folks over to spend time in the U.S. I think a lot of them thought they were under tourist visas to some extent. So there were a lot of immigration issues that were problematic. So we worked it all out. They're very successful now. They've actually opened a couple other offices, but you don't want to stumble into those things. So it's better if you think about it ahead of time, especially from an employment perspective. You're in much better shape. There are ways, but we work with companies every day that are coming here to the U.S., hiring folks in the U.S. successfully. We're creating cost-effective ways for them to do that. So there is a solution to that. You just have to ask the right questions at the beginning and not kind of just walk into it. The other thing I want to kind of highlight is what Hu said about data. And data is very important. I think that to a European audience, well, in a UK audience, you have this idea that the GDPR is the preeminent kind of privacy provisions, and so we have had some challenges talking to some of our clients about the fact that they say, well, we're GDPR compliant, so therefore we're okay, right, in the US? And the answer is, no, you're really not. I think that you have to be really careful because we, being here in California, we have our new California Consumer Privacy Act, which creates a little bit different headaches for people, and so it's often good. You have to do a kind of a double check to make sure. Also, I think you have to make sure that your privacy provisions are always being kept up to date around the world. For one particular company, we had that conversation with somebody that said that they were not so concerned about their U.S. privacy provisions. When we looked at it, we found sizable problems with their privacy provisions for the U.S., but also we found issues for them with the GDPR as well, and how they're doing business in other parts of the world. So, it's always good to take a look at it and think of your privacy not just from one geography, but from a global perspective. And I think we're seeing very much successful brands, especially brands that are making a lot of money online, taking that much more seriously. The other point is that being transparent about your privacy can be your privacy protection now can be a competitive advantage. And so we work with a lot of our clients that are looking to say how could their customers want them to be transparent about privacy. And so therefore, it's not just simply checking the boxes, but it's creating a ironclad protection that their customers appreciate.
Thanks very much, David. I just David Brown sort of weighed in with a bit of a sales pitch for the US, and I wonder if it's not quite a right of reply, but to ask Sarah just to comment a little bit about the online market in CE countries, and just how maybe touch on about how attractive that is at the moment for expansion.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anthony. So the view from a European perspective is that we saw a significant increase in online sales in the past years. So to give you some examples, 58% of Austrians shop online. In Poland, more than 60% shop online and spend over 10 billion on this. In the Czech Republic, about 68% shop online. So based on the trends prior to the COVID outbreak, it was expected that online sales will essentially increase. It was expected that by 2040, over 90% of all purchases would be done digitally via online tools. And then came COVID, and the impact of COVID on online business is, I would say, a relevant question. And in many parts of Europe, there is an increase in online shopping. For example, more than 50% of digital buyers in Germany bought more during the lockdown, while 70% of French, Spanish, and Italians bought more. In Austria, more than 30% of the consumers bought essentially more. And what's interesting is that over 10% have bought for the first time online. And I would say the good news is that about 80% of the consumers who started buying groceries online during the pandemic are planning to continue to do so. So we think that as an entrepreneur to expand in an online environment in Europe, many jurisdictions give you flexibility on how to structure this expansion, at least to a certain extent. One example, which is partly COVID-driven, I would say, is a Japanese client of us who has developed robotic cleaning machines and related software recently. Entered into a cooperation with a European company. And part of this cooperation is at the appointment of the European company as the global sales and marketing platform or organization for these robotic cleaning machines. So for this purpose, the European company on the one side and local partners in several European countries will create joint ventures. These are countries like Germany, Netherlands, Poland, Austria, and so on. And each of these joint ventures will distribute these cleaning machines, the products and the related software to the end consumers. So for the client in the online distribution and the marketing plays an important role in addition to the sublease and sale of the cleaning machines through traditional ways, such as, for example, through commercial agents. And this structure to sell or sublease cleaning machines through several local partners, through joint ventures to end consumers is basically, I would say, an answer to several legal issues in several jurisdictions in Europe, and also the result of economic considerations. And as Ho mentioned, it is important to choose carefully the right partner when expanding in generally, and in particular when you have such cultural differences, like on the one hand, Japanese clients expanding for the first time in Europe. That's for me. Thank you.
So Sarah, I think that is interesting. The expansion or the consumers becoming used to dealing online and it creating opportunities. A slightly different side of that we've seen is in the luxury goods markets, where in the past, often luxury brand owners wanted to sell through physical retail stores and actually did not want to sell online for reasons of protecting the brand and the luxury status. But they've obviously had to go online because of COVID and the fact that physical retail stores have been shut down. And they seem to be continuing to do that despite physical retail reopening recently in the UK. I mean, is that true, do you think, in the rest of Europe as well? Where do you see that trend as well, where even when physical stores are coming back, online is still strong?
When thinking about fashion luxury, I have read recently also some reports about these industries and also spoke with clients. They have not suffered only in physical shops, but also in terms of online. And I think it's not related to the restrictions we're all facing, but generally in changing of the consumer behavior in general. But what we think, also based on the experience and the discussions we had with our clients, is that in those sectors you mentioned, in particular in fashion and clothing industry, these challenges will remain only for certain parts of time, and we assume that these industries will be back to normal, or at least they will reach 70 to 80% of their turnover by the second quarter, or at least or a third quarter of 2021.
Okay, thank you.
I would also in this respect that the online purchases will be increasing, whilst the classic brick and mortar will be decreasing. But there is a different interesting aspect, that the flagship stores are moving towards sort of really representation areas, making the customer experience in a quite another level.
Yeah.
We're seeing from a luxury goods standpoint, clients talking more about packaging being more important, that the idea that you know how your package arrives with your luxury goods. And then the other thing that's interesting is we're seeing social media playing a bigger role, because if you buy a luxury product, you want to show it off. And so the idea is that if you're not going out as much as you were previously, how do you show it off to your, instead of showing it off to your 30 or 40 best friends, you're showing off to your 3,000 or 4,000 followers on Instagram. So I think that's where we are seeing an increased focus by all retail and luxury goods retailers in particular on social media promotion, advertising, things like that, more than we've seen in years past.
So David, I guess situations like using brand ambassadors who are trusted in the jurisdictions you're trying to sell into is very important, sort of people who are known quantities there.
It's absolutely important, and it's become a real business. I mean, I was talking to a client the other day, and they were like, well, we're going to send, they have a fantastic product. They have a fantastic product. And they were going to send it to like all these like famous people and hope that they would get some kind of hit. And I said, well, that would have worked a couple of years ago. That kind of stuff still happened. But now this is their business. So I explained to them, I said, they're going to come back to you and say, I like your product a lot. If you want me to promote it, it's $100,000. That's just how it is. Yeah. But seriously, it is a valuable. We represent both sides of it. We help influencers. We represent several influencers. We also represent brands that use them. It's all about getting your product out there. That's where people see things.
Yeah. Can I just say something about one of the things that came out from our poll about the top hit around geopolitical issues, and so obviously we're thinking about things like the US election, what that will do in terms of future trade arrangements, Brexit, of course, for us in the UK, but also elsewhere in the world, and will trade deals be done, particularly with the EU? I'm a cautious soul. Would you say to clients, well, why don't we wait until January at least to see what happens with the US election, with Brexit, with COVID, and then think about investing? Or do you think it's the time to be looking to invest right now whilst we're in this particular situation? Any thoughts on that? Who's going to be brave?
Can I say something? Well,
Hugh, you go first. Go on. Sorry.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. So I would just say, I guess when others are waiting, is probably the best opportunity. And so I guess whether you look at the U.S. election or many other, I guess, geopolitical changes, but the fundamentals of the business, fundamentals of the economy is the same. So I would say just if you find an opportunity and just go for it. And during the last few months, I think a lot of business owners in China are waiting to, I guess, for the situation to get better. But on the other hand, other people are looking at new business models or renovating their premise, training people, hiring new people, and these business now are flourishing. So I would say now is the best time.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, despite the rhetoric, I'd say that the Trump economy looks a lot like the Obama economy did, at least pre-COVID. And so I think, the assumption would be that if there would be a Biden economy, it will look like the Trump economy. So I think that, I don't think that, you're going to see transformational changes to how economic life is done. I think social issues, things like that, might be of more importance for the next administration. But I do think that, you can plan that out. You can figure that out. If you have a business model that is uniquely impacted by certain, campaign issues, then, maybe you think about it. But I think that's 95% of it is going to be relatively the same. Okay.
We also had a question from the audience about, I won't go into the detail, but it's about tax and differentials in terms of tax and whatever. Would you say your jurisdictions are friendly in terms of tax requirements to entrepreneurs who are coming there to set up, or what's the position?
I'm happy to start if that's okay.
Yeah.
I think it depends on the exact method of entering the market, but generally yes. Despite some challenges. With the right structure, you can have a very friendly tax regime in the States. The main challenge is that we don't have a typical water's edge tax system. So the US tax laws do think about looking at what else you're doing outside of the US, but there are some pretty simple ways to limit that and say, if it happens in the US, it can be taxed here, and if it happens somewhere else, it doesn't. There are other structures we can use if there is an anticipated early sort of losses for the first year or two, or three even, in the States, to take some of those losses home. Specifics depend on where you're coming in from, but there is a robust tax treaty that UK entrepreneurs can use when entering the US market and avoid some double taxation, avoid excessive withholding on dividends back to a UK parent company and that sort of thing. So I think so. We can always do better, but it is pretty friendly.
Yeah. Anybody else want to come in on that? I've got a related question, which is from another question put to us, which is, it goes back to the .com days from what I remember. When you're getting somebody into your jurisdiction and you're helping them set up, would you ever do a deal in relation to your fees, which is that your fees are dependent upon the success, so there's contingency? Or would you even take a stake in the business? Is that model still there, or has it died a death?
We don't do it, but other U.S. firms. We don't do it, other U.S. firms do. We find it a little bit of a conflict of interest. But that being said, we do provide for entrepreneurs deferred fees. So getting them up on running on their feet. So we till their first rounds of funding. So we can be very creative in helping them. But we don't do it. But there are some firms that will do it and have done it somewhat successfully. Yeah.
Sarah, Roland?
Well, yeah, it's a similar situation here in Austria. We know there are several firms, law firms, in particular smaller firms, they're accepting kind of share participation. And in our case, it would be probably a conflict of interest. But what we do is we have broken deal discounts and success fees, which are in many cases are just not an obligation of the client, but because by law we're actually not allowed to agree on success fees. So the client decides whether they pay such success fees or not.
And Hugh, is there restrictions in China, or is it something that people will do? Or?
Well, not at our firm. So we offer incentive, I guess, if we take in a new client and if the client is, new in the market. So we like to help the client to succeed. But so we'll offer maybe, a fixed fee arrangement and to make sure like our fee will be reasonable. And so we also could include abortion discount. So if the deal does not go through, and so we can offer discount in the fee that we otherwise would charge, and so that kind of arrangement is possible. And also on the tax issue, I would like also to comment in China, depends on the particular industry and the location. So for example, like Hainan Island now is having a huge tax incentive for certain industries, and you don't have to pay, for example, like income taxation for corporate or individuals if you meet certain criteria. And also we have free trade zones in different parts of China, and certain industries, especially in the technology side, new resources, new energy, new inventions are heavily encouraged, and so that could be very good tax incentives over there.
Okay, thank you, Anthony.
And we love to do business. I think that's the other point, is that if it's a great business, we try to find a way to make the legal work. And because if we think that something's going to be successful, if especially if the people behind it have been successful previously, we'll find a way to make it work. Because one of the things that we're fearful of is if you get bad legal advice up front, many fantastic businesses won't be successful because they'll be structured improperly. So we're kind of we'll find a way to find it so economically you can make it work, if it's a good business, if it's good people behind it.
Thanks, Dave.
Very conscious of time, but I have one very quick question, which hopefully you can answer quickly, each of you, which is that if you're expanding online, do you need a presence in each of your countries? Can you just sort of open up a website and just, from the UK, just do what you do? Or are you required to somehow maintain a greater presence? I wonder if you could each maybe, starting with David, just run through.
No.
Sure.
No. In the US, there's no requirement to have a presence. We work with several brands that do not. Shipping is complicated in that if you don't have, you also can have a distributor here, but you don't have any stores or any people. You just have your product shipped here. But you can operate it from the UK, shipping things. We had a client that came to us because they really were interested in coming to the US because they were shipping. It's a relatively small business, but they were doing about £500,000 worth of business in the US, and they had no US website. They had no US presence at all, and everything was being shipped from the UK and charged in British pounds. So you can do that, but if you make it more in country, you'll probably be more successful. If you put a US website in, if you have US dollars, if you ship from the US to reduce shipping costs and things like that, you'll be more successful, but there's no requirement.
Sure. And just to quickly add, when you do take that approach, of course, you can meet the growing consumer demand for 2-day free shipping that everyone's become addicted to, thanks to Amazon, more easily. Once you do have that physical presence, there is a bit of an analysis to decide, is it enough of a physical presence that you've got income tax or sales tax type obligations here? So but yes, you could start by just shipping in from abroad.
From Europe and then maybe to China? Roland, are you able to give us a quick, I appreciate it'll be a very high level answer to that. You're on mute, Sarah.
Sorry, in the case of the so-called information society services, which includes online sales of goods and services, electronic search, and the law of the provider's home member state will apply in that respect. For example, if a German company offers products via an online shop in Austria, German law system would be applicable, and the local presence would likely not be required in Austria. And yeah, when we, for example, talk about US, there it's also, it very much depends on the overall structure of the website, how you structure the setup, and for example, whether you use an Austrian domain or you use an international one like .com. So you can avoid having a presence in Austria if you're a US client when you choose the right structure.
Just a quick view from China, who?
Sure. So I guess there are 3 kind of different situations. The first, if you provide either service or products into China, but without a physical presence, as long as you don't sign any agreements physically in China, and the deals are all closed out of China, it should be okay. And so that's purely offshore. And if you bring certain people onshore to China and do, for example, marketing, and there's one form you can choose, which is the representative office. So you can establish a representative office, which is not treated as a fully established entity, but you can have people over here to work as a liaison office. And the third way, of course, is to have a physical presence, and then the whole deal of a business structure and everything else.
Thank you very much. I'm very conscious of timing, and I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of the questions on the chat. So what we prefer to have, of course, is to have an ability to mingle afterwards. And what we're going to just put up a very quick poll just to see if anybody else wants to get in touch with any of the speakers afterwards to develop some of the points we've made. Conscious that the guests are from a huge variety of different businesses, and so we're going to quickly flash that poll up. You'll be able to just click on it if you would like to. Like anybody to be in touch with you afterwards. I suppose whilst you're doing that, just a very quick point from me, which is that actually Alison Cooper on the chat said time to invest now, which struck me as being the right approach. And I think certainly sort of echoed by all of our speakers that there's opportunity and there are ways of doing that quite quickly and quite easily with some local advice. So I think I sort of leave this with a very positive message. So probably conscious of time, we'll wrap it up. Thank you very much. Thank you all very much for attending. It was very nice to
thank you.
See you. But and many thanks to all our speakers for fascinating insight.